Chapter 15. Crazy Over Horses. We thought it would be a good idea to surprise Mother by planting a vegetable garden in the backyard. If we could grow some of our own food, it would cut expenses considerably. Ernestine had written the Department of Agriculture for instructions, and they came while Mother was in the hospital. Martha went downstairs and bought the seeds. Even Tom, who was a city man and didn't realize how much work would be involved, was enthusiastic. We spaded up almost half an acre, raked it carefully, and put in the seeds. We were worn out toward the end of the job, which took the better part of 2 days, and Tom had to finish most of the heavy work. The soil was fairly good, but the Department of Agriculture bulletins were unanimous in agreeing that fertilizer should be added for best results. When Martha telephoned the seed store to price fertilizer, she was appalled by the cost. She broke the news to us out in the garden, where Tom was watering and the rest of us were surveying our work and digging up an occasional seed to see if it had begun to sprout yet. It cost $10, maybe more, to do the job right, Martha said gloomily. We want to surprise Mother, but not with any bill for $10. Tom's hands were blistered and his back was stiff. His original enthusiasm had waned, but he was determined his work was not going to be wasted. You should have thought about that $10 before you half killed me, he told Martha angrily. Whatever it is, we want best results. It's fertilizer, Martha explained. They want $10 for the commercial kind and $12 for manure. They want $12 for that? Tom shouted. Are they crazy? Don't let them cheat you. That's what I told them, Martha agreed. I told them not to think I was born yesterday. I'll get you all the stuff you want, Tom promised, and it ain't going to cost you a cent. Martha said that was grand, but Ernestine said that Mother wouldn't approve. We don't want you to spend your money for it, she told Tom. Maybe we can get along as well without it. Don't worry about me, Duchess, Tom cackled. I wasn't born yesterday neither, but I got friends and I know where to get it wholesale. Later that afternoon, he nailed a wooden box to the express wagon, got 3 snow shovels out of the garage, and summoned Frank and Bill. They went out the back way, so the girls wouldn't see them, and they started to tour the neighborhood. Milk and ice were still delivered from horse-drawn wagons, and some of the streets near our house was used as bridle paths. No sparrow ever swooped down on what the trio was looking for with more delight than did Tom. Hink, 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 he snorted while he shoveled. I got friends all right. Some of my best friends is horses. $12, Frank said scornfully. We had to go into business. I never thought I'd live to see the day when they sold it for money, Tom nodded. Pull the wagon over closer, Billy. My back is fairly broken from that hoeing. The neighborhood was a fashionable one, and most of the residents knew us or Mother. Some of them waved from porches or open windows as Tom and the 2 boys paraded along the street with their shovels on the shoulders and eyes optimistically peeled on the roadway. A few chauffeurs wandered down the driveways for a closer look, but they were fortunately aware of Tom's reputation for belligerence, and they avoided trouble. None of them said more than a hello. Tom seemed disappointed he had no hecklers. Go ahead, he taunted one chauffeur, who must have been 30 years younger and 80 pounds heavier than he. Why don't you ask what we're doing? Take it easy, Tom, the chauffeur humored him. You're too tough for me. I'm not opening my mouth. You'd better not either, said Tom, looking significantly into the cart. When I get through with you, you wouldn't dast to get close it. It took a couple of hours to fill the box. Tom and the boys brought the wagon home and dumped it behind the back fence, where the pile was out of sight. We'll go out every afternoon, Tom told Frank and Bill. As long as you behave yourself. If you ain't good, I'm going to leave you home. The 2 boys, who had enjoyed themselves as much as Tom, promised they'd be good. Don't say anything to the girls, Tom warned. I think Martha would take it all right, but the Duchess would say it hurt her social standing. The boys got home in the afternoon ahead of the high school girls, and thus could get away without being noticed. It took a good deal longer the second day to fill the box because they were covering the same territory. On subsequent days, they were forced to go farther and farther from home, but the pile behind the fence grew steady, and even after they knew the pile was high enough, they found excuses to go after more. We might need some more for next year, Tom pointed out, and every year there is fewer horses. They soon found out which were the most productive streets and how many days they should be allowed to ellipse before going back over a street. Sometimes there'd be an argument about whether it would pay to go around a certain block, and the person who had advocated the detour would either crow or eat crow, depending on the pickings. "Maybe we did go up there yesterday," Tom would say, "but I see sparrows, and where sparrows is, that's what we're looking for." Tom was invariably right in selecting the streets. He may have had sort of a sixth sense. Or, as Frank and Bill suspected, he may have cased the neighborhood during the morning while we were all in school, so as to impress them with his infallibility. At any rate, he swore he saw birds when neither of them did, and he could predict with exactness what would be found around a curve in the street. The sport, because that's what it was considered, might have continued for weeks if they hadn't bumped into Ernestine. They had carefully avoided the street she and Martha took coming home from school, but on that particular afternoon Ernestine had been given a ride part of the way home and was off her accustomed path, and she was walking with a fellow. The boys and Tom didn't see her approaching. Bill had maneuvered the express wagon into position, and Tom and Frank were shoveling. "Hank, Hank, Hank," Tom was chuckling. "I told you I seen sparrows. You can't fool these old eagle eyes. This is always a good place. This is an everyday street from now on." "That's 11 for Tom and only 5 for us," Bill said enviously. "He can spot it a mile away." "I'm the champion," Tom crowed. "Ain't no doubt about it. It's the biggest one today, too. The little ones of yours we might as well throw it back." He looked up and saw Ernestine. "Duck," he warned, squatting behind the cart, "or she'll have us beheaded when she gets back to the palace." Ernestine's friend was intent in conversation. Frank and Bill had never seen him before, and he wasn't paying any attention to them. Ernestine had seen them and was watching them out of the corner of her eye. She was blushing and furious. She held her head high, and she tried to make believe she was listening to every word of the conversation. Frank and Bill turned their backs because they didn't want to embarrass her any more than they already had. Tom, peeking guiltily from behind the cart, started mumbling about how much the robbers at the seed store wanted to charge $12. Ernestine passed without her friends being aware that she knew them, but as she walked down the street, she didn't feel right about it. No matter what they were doing, they were kin and kith. It was a cheap thing to pretend not to know them. And after all, they were out collecting what they were collecting to save the family money. "Just a second," she told her friends. "Wait up." She turned and walked back to the wagon and looked into it. "Hello, Frank," she said loudly. "Hello, Bill. Hello, Tom." They said hello, Ernestine. "It's a fine load," she told them. "I think you better take it home now." They said they were glad she liked it, and they headed home. Ernestine rejoined her friend, who hadn't seemed to be paying much attention. "They're my brothers," she said defensively. "At least the 2 boys are. We're going to have a vegetable garden." "That stuff will make it grow," he nodded. "We use it on our lawn." "It sure will," Ernestine agreed. "It's much better than the commercial kind." "It sure is," she nodded. "You might tell them we passed some of it back there a ways. Did you notice?" "I don't think so," said Ernestine. "Anyway, they got plenty of it already. It seems a shame to miss it. It gets more expensive every year." Ernestine and her friend continued down the street. She wondered how romance was supposed to flourish for any member of a family with so many younger brothers. And she wondered why, with all the topics of conversation in the world to choose from, they would have to end up on that one. Before Mother came home from the hospital, Ernestine warned the boys not to mention how they got the fertilizer. She thought Mother had enough on her mind without worrying about the fact that almost every one of her friends in town must have seen Frank and Bill making the rounds with their cart. But the soil did look fine and rich, and it was one of the first things Mother noticed. "Where in the world did you get that lovely fertilizer?" she asked. "I don't see any check stubs made out for that." "It's a long story," said Ernestine. "It seems that Tom has certain friends." "I guess you better not tell me," Mother smiled. "I have an idea it's one of those things the less I know about, the better I'll feel." "Have you ever heard of Pegasus?" Ernestine asked brightly. "Well, once upon a time—" "Never mind, dear," Mother interrupted. "I saw the box on the express wagon." "It won't happen again," Ernestine promised, "and you ought to see all that's left over out by the back fence." Mother thought the garden was a wonderful idea. The seeds had started to come up before long, and the job of weeding and the cultivating was added by Ernestine and Martha to our work assignment charts, and we were fairly faithful about them. We may not have gotten best results because, as the agriculture bulletins pointed out, manure is supposed to be aged before it is applied as fertilizer. But we did at least get results, good results. There was corn, beans, peas, carrots, tomatoes, beets, kale, and lettuce. The girls canned some of it for winter use. Later, we got a dozen hens, and that cut expenses some more, and helped solve the fertilization problem for future years. Fred and Dan thought it would solve the problem altogether if we bought a pony, but the older ones reluctantly vetoed the idea. Tom named and made pets of the hens, and they'd follow him around the yard and jump up and perch on his fingers. When the lanes lagged, he'd make a show of spiking their mash with quinine remedy. The results after such dosings were spectacular. The poultry bulletins which we had written for said the most you could expect from a dozen hens was 8 or 10 eggs a day. Sometimes we'd find 25 or 30 eggs in the nest when we got home from school. Sometimes, too, we'd see empty store-bought egg containers poking out from under old newspapers in the kitchen wastebasket. We didn't want to spoil Tom's joke. When he wasn't looking, we'd push them down out of sight.